All right, welcome to the last section on this topic 11. We're going to talk a little bit about workplace violence. Okay, unfortunately, we do have to talk about the bad stuff too. Between '06 and '10, there were an average of 555 murders at work each year. Um, I suspect that number has in fact increased, although I don't know. I didn't look the statistic up. I could be a victim of, the old just because there's a lot of news stories about workplace murders doesn't mean there's actually an increase in the number of workplace murders. So who knows? There's definitely been an increase in stories about workplace murders, almost always with a gun. And so, hey, maybe it is the left wing agenda to push it. Who knows? More than 2 million American workers self-report that they have been a victim of physical attacks. I was looking this up, and what surprised me was the industry, the field, whatever, that seems to have the largest number of physical attacks was nurses. What? Yeah, apparently nurses had the highest rate of physical attack of any occupation. 6 million more have reported that they were threatened. Okay? And interest in workplace violence started in '86 when, where is it? Patrick Sherrill at a post office. It, it made an interesting meme at the time about the disgruntled postal worker. And the disgruntled postal worker became the model by which workplace violence was understood. Okay? So, which jobs have a higher risk for assault? Well, obviously nurses, but those that have contact with the public. Well, that makes sense because, as we're going to put down at the very bottom, most violence at work is in fact by outsiders, not insiders. Though, if we take some of the news stories we've heard, outsiders are recently terminated insiders. So that's kind of a. So is there a distinction between an insider and an outsider and a recently terminated insider? I don't know. But obviously, exchange of money is obvious a big one. Those that deliver passengers, goods, and services. Yeah, of course. Um, we find, yeah, and now we find that passengers are also at risk, right? Not just the drivers. Having a mobile workplace, like the taxi, or any kind of mobile workplace where you're driving your van or something to your, okay. Working with unstable people. Yes, that will do it. Working alone or in small groups. Okay. Like very interesting. So we definitely find that there's a profile of a dangerous employee. Dangerous employees have these characteristics. White males, what a surprise. Okay. Social isolates, they don't know very many other people. They've experienced a triggering event, though I don't know exactly what the definition of a triggering event would be. They're often vocally aggressive and act out violent behaviors before they become dangerous per se. Sometimes bizarre and unusual, and one or often two warning signs: an overall history of violence, evidence of severe disorder, depression, chemical dependency, obsession with another individual, stalkers, chronic frustration, preoccupation with weapons. Okay, and so we're in interesting situation where we're in an age of if you see something, say something. But we're also in an age of you don't want to stereotype or stigmatize people. And so it's an interesting crossroads, especially as a faculty member. Sometimes if you see something, say something. It's because if a label gets put on someone, labels have some ability to come to life now, don't they? So we'll just, it's hard to, if you see, in the age of if you see something, say something, it's hard to balance this out. So anyway, what are the risk factors? A mishandled termination. Yeah, obviously recently fired. And when I say mishandled, that is to say a perceived mishandled termination, right? Risk factors: bringing weapons onto the work site. drugs or alcohol on the job, holding a grudge, personal disturbances, hypersensitivity to criticism, okay? Fascination with weapons, okay? And so preoccupation with violent themes, etc. So there is these risk factors for individuals and these situational triggers which are also present. So one model for organizational motivated aggression, to help us to understand it a little bit, we find that, here it is, organizational motivated aggression. In fact, here, let me look at the image and then come back to that. We find that there are individual characteristics that feed into organizational motivated aggression and organizational environmental characteristics. All right, things like rigid, punitive, aggressive organizations. Okay, so we talk about these risk factors here of the individual, but there's also risk factors of the organization, punitive organizations, rigid, inflexible organizations. So these work together to input into organization motivated aggression. Now, this aggression has consequences called organization motivated violence. Okay, it's so organization motivated aggression is an attempt by someone inside or outside to cause injury or be destructive, whereas organization motivated violence is the consequence, the result of that aggression. And so the aggression leads to a consequence, but that consequence is mediated by organizational action, the response that the organization has to this type of aggression. And then we have organizational action in response to the violence that has already occurred. Okay? Some other theorizing, or Martinko and Zellers took a look at some works and found some findings that were fairly reliable and consistent. Listen to me. Reliable means consistent. So here I am, reliable and redundantly consistent. Okay, so more frustration at work leads to more incidents of aggression and violence. So this is fairly consistent in multiple areas. Individuals who exhibit aggression and violence in the past have usually been rewarded for it in the past. They're just pulling, sounds like something from a general psych class right here. Employees who have an external locus of control, where is it? Under my head. An external locus of control are more likely to respond to negative events aggressively. An external locus of control is people that believe that events in their lives are controlled by sources outside themselves. Okay? And so if people believe that the events in their lives are, so let's say, for example, you believe your workplace success is not in fact the product of your work, but instead the product of an external thing such as a manager's arbitrary decisions. Okay? And so people with external locus of control are more likely to blame others for their issues and therefore have violent outcomes. Clear gender differences. You rarely, though occasionally, but you rarely hear about females. And again, it's not just males, it's white males. And again, not exclusively. We had the Navy Yard shooter who was not white, and we had, I can't remember, the one in California recently who was a woman. So this stuff does happen, okay? That's right. She was the YouTuber, right? Yeah, the YouTube woman out in California. So some of the stuff about workplace violence, these are not as clear. These are more tentative findings. Minor frustrations at work may act as triggers. That doesn't even have to be a big frustration, just a series of small frustrations. It seems as though small frustrations can sort of converge together to become a large one. Individuals that are high in negative affectivity, they have a lot of bad emotions, are more likely to respond to aversive outcomes with aggressive behaviors, as are people with impulsive personalities. So people that have high negative affectivity, people that are that have impulsive personalities, are more likely to respond. Remember, appraisal. That was one of the key words when we were talking stress earlier in this topic. And that shit happens to everyone. The way you appraise it determines the way that you respond to it. Individuals high in negative affectivity, individuals with impulsive personalities are more likely to appraise praise an aversive thing as something that needs to be responded to in a violent fashion. Based on their findings, they propose that some aggressive behaviors happen without thought. Okay? And these are the ones that scare me the most. I'm sorry. I think this is more than just a proposition. Now, I am going to get on my high horse for a moment, but man, oh man, we had a conversation a couple of years ago at the university about allowing guns on campus, and the state of Texas said all public universities in the state must accept guns on campus. You have no choice. It was amazing. Every single president of every single public university in Texas says, we don't want them. But the Texas state legislature said, tough shit, you're going to get the guns. However, private schools did not have to get this mandate. Instead, we were allowed to have come to an organizational decision on this. And it was amazing. Every private university in the state of Texas rejected guns on campus. Zero wanted them. And when we were in the process of having this discussion, I was very verbally outspoken on this because I must tell you that I understand that some people are obsessed with weapons. I got it. But you know what happens is you've got sweet little 21-year-old seniors, juniors that have gotten straight A's their whole life and then all of a sudden gets an unfair grade. Boom. Without conscious thought, people snap. They do. I've seen it. I have had students snap on me, and I swear if that one had a weapon at that moment, bing, problem done. And so it is this that I'm personally worried about. I am not worried about mass shooters that are planning. Maybe I should be. Maybe I'm naive. I'm worried about that violence which occurs without conscious thought. Okay? So anyway, often management is seen as the cause of negative outcomes, and therefore management becomes the target, but not always. Co-workers, we've seen in more recent shootings, it's been co-workers, and in fact, in some of these shootings, they're just random shootings. Okay? So, who knows? So what kinds of directions for future work should we look at? Well, obviously, we should look at strategies to reduce bullying in the workplace, But, you know, we need to go back. I mean, and at least there's an awareness in our public schools now, because clearly those kids that are bullies at 5, 6, 7 years old become bullies as adults. It's just, it does. And it's not always the bullies that are going to become violent. It's the bullies that are going to push somebody else to become violent. Okay? Perhaps surveillance, training, coaching. Okay? So maybe we need to look towards not just actual physical aggression, but instead subtle, covert, verbal aggression, all of these other factors. We're finding that more and more universities and companies, I listen to me, universities, because I just had to sit through this video, are implementing active shooter training to try to show people what to do in the event of. So there is an awareness that we should try to not just, tackle the violence, the aggression itself, but we should perhaps go to the precursors such as bullying, and in fact we should also let's deal with the consequences or minimize the consequences if it is to occur through training. All right, so that's all I got for topic 11, and so now you ought to be getting yourself ready to study for exam number 3, right? So, with that being said, I'll take a pause and we'll start in on exam 4 material some other day.